Story 1. I was born to a teenage single mother. I had a lot more freedom and less supervision as a child because both of her parents, my grandparents, died soon after I was born, so there were not many options for babysitters. Because she worked two jobs, I was often on my own after school until about 8 or 9 at night, sometimes later. She struggled to hold down jobs because she had little formal education, and the grind eventually wore her down. At one point, she walked 11 miles a day to and from work because we did not have a vehicle. Eventually, we lost our home and lived in and out of shelters until I was about 12. I learned a lot about the world during those years. At the time, I hated it and was jealous of other kids who had normal lives. Now that I am older, I would not trade it for anything. It gave me every bit of the motivation I have. It gave me better social skills. I had to learn to make friends quickly when we moved frequently. Most importantly, it taught me to be humble and never view less fortunate people as beneath me. She was diagnosed with cancer when I was 13 and died when I was 15, which was devastating, because in my opinion I grew up to be a good person and a good father. I would love to have her around to see that. Story 2. I noticed that I did not have the same opportunities as other children because my mother was a teen mom, which can lead to struggle and poverty without family support. I always wanted to play sports, but she could not afford the equipment to participate at school. I had to mature quickly because my mother was still a child herself. It was unnerving when teachers told me I seemed older than my age when I was 10. Story 3. I was born in 1964 when my mother was 16. My grandparents adopted me so I would have a name. My father's family paid the hospital bills, and that was it, because they did not want to ruin his chances to attend the Virginia Military Institute. My mother had 3 other children by at least 2 other men and tried to treat me like a little sister, although a girl in 3rd grade decided it was her duty to tell me I did not really have a daddy. We lived in a 3-bedroom country farmhouse with 4 children, my grandparents, and my mother and her pedophile husband. It was a constant scene of fists and screaming almost daily. At least we could go outside. I lost a brother to a gunshot after my stepfather cheated on my mother and left a gun unsecured while he was leaving. Another brother accidentally shot him. My mother continued to treat me like a sister until she decided she wanted to be a mother. My grandmother was the one who raised me and the one I consider my true mother. When she died, she left me the land with her house on it, and my mother tricked me into signing it over to her. I was very naive. She accused my straight-edge goth children, who are in their 30s now, of being on drugs because they wore black, and she has held a remark I made about moving away when I was 16 against me to this day. My father sent me $50 when I graduated and $100 when I married for the first time, and I did not know he was my father until I was 23. I would have liked to have had a different childhood. Edit. You all are some wonderful people. Thank you to those who offered kind and healing words. Hugs to those who need a little extra. Story 4. When friends came over for the first time when I was growing up, I often heard, "I didn't know you had an older sister." I do not. That is my mother. Because my mother and I are only 16 years apart, we liked much of the same music. That made going to concerts easier, since we often wanted to attend the same shows. I have seen many more bands than my friends have. Story 5. One of my friends was born to a teenage mother. She doesn't talk about it much, but she says it's nice that all the family members, including her great-grandparents, are still alive. Story 6. Mom was 15 when she had me. Honestly, my life sucked. She used to say she could have given me up for adoption and then decided not to because she realized I would love her unconditionally no matter what. Our relationship progressed negatively because of that mindset. Every negative thing I did contradicted what she thought motherhood would be like. I was something she could pick up, put down, and leave behind at her leisure. Several times she dropped me off at a family member's house and disappeared. Once I came home from kindergarten and no one was there. My father was in prison. The next morning my uncle showed up. He had heard my mother had left and had a gut feeling he needed to go to my house. There was no food and the heat had been turned off by the utility company. I do not remember much about that time other than the peanut butter and jelly sandwiches and the movie Demolition Man. She had some pretty bad trauma and never processed it properly, so when she was reminded of it she could get really angry. When she was good, she was golden. She could be the most fun person you could ask for, but she was not a mother. She never held or comforted me. She expected hugs and comfort. She was a kid and thought with a kid's mind. When we had spare change, she would walk me to the ice cream place, buy herself an ice cream, and then we would go back home. As I got older, our already strange relationship became stranger. She told me she did not want people to know she was my mother and asked me to introduce her as my sister. She would tell people she had 3 children, my siblings, and not claim me because people would do the math. She wanted to be friends with my friends and to hang around when they were there. What I know about having a teenage mother is this: I loved her with a kind of fanatical worship that messed me up for a long time. She could be funny and cruel at the same time. When she gave you attention, your world would be brighter. But when she was mad at you, the world would be dark. She never grew out of her teenage mindset, and I had to come to grips with that. I cannot say that every teenage mother is like mine, but mine was rough. I do not have the words to express my gratitude to everyone who has shared similar stories or offered support. Hearing that my story is not unique, as painful as it is, makes me know I am not alone. I cannot give you all a hug, though I wish I could. From the bottom of my heart, thank you. People asked how I am doing now. I just graduated with my Master of Social Work last week. Years ago, I ran away from home and ended up at my best friend's house. After a lot of work, hurt, and healing, I no longer see my biological mother. I was adopted by my best friend's family when I was 29. That paper may seem insignificant to people who do not understand, but I stop and stare at it sometimes. My adoptive mother hung the adoption certificate on the wall. It is legal proof that I have a family who loves me, and no one can take that away. The best thing I can say is go to therapy. Find a therapist who works for you. I went to 5 before I found the one that clicked. Separate your blood relatives from the people who love you. Found family is as valid as or more valid than those you share blood with. Your friends can be your family. My closest friends are my sisters and brothers, and I call them that. I tell friends and family that I love them. It is hard when you are raised by people who weaponize love, but in the end, love is what makes life worth it. Also, forgive yourself. Forgive yourself when, hurt or scared or angry, your parent comes out of your mouth. Acknowledge that you are breaking the cycle. We were raised in a different world, and everyone sounds like their parents sometimes. For those who had parents like mine, the scariest thing can be hearing yourself echo what they said. Sometimes I feel the desire to make someone work for my attention, and then I realize that is my mother's influence, not mine. Be kind to yourself. My adoptive mother says the world treats you like you think you should be treated, and our parents raised us to think we should be treated like dirt. They were wrong. We should be, and with inner reflection, hard work, therapy, and the support of our found families, we will see ourselves as people worthy of being loved. We are worthy. I am worthy. You are worthy. From one stranger to another, I love you all. Story 7. I was primarily raised by my grandparents after age 5 because my mother could not handle the responsibility and my father wanted nothing to do with us. She neglected me, literally played World of Warcraft, and slept all hours of the day. There were times when I missed school because she would not get up, or I would have to eat uncooked frozen waffles because I was so hungry. I had to grow up very quickly. When my grandparents moved us in, it was better, but she always acted more like a sibling. When she lived with us, she would argue with me, steal my things, and go on and on about how everyone thinks she is my sister and not my mother. She tried to squeeze some more youth into her life when I was young, always partying, drinking, and coming home messed up. She constantly brought me around her problematic boyfriends, including a stalker, a man who is now a white supremacist, and a man who was convicted of sexually assaulting his ex-stepdaughter who was the same age as me during their relationship. By the time I was 10, I was already significantly more mature than her. She resents me for that, as well as my intelligence and academic success and the fact that I am happy when she never was, despite her best efforts to damage me psychologically. I get to live my life and she never did. She started doing drugs at some point, but she stopped and got her life together when she became pregnant with my little brother. It did not last long. She is in rehab now, and my little brother is a victim of the same circumstances that I was. She has not grown at all. Having me at a young age must have stunted her growth or something, because she is the most immature person I know. She tried to make it up to me when I was 18 by taking me on a trip to Europe, but she ended up losing my passport and then left without me while I had to figure out how to return to the United States all by myself. It goes to show how little changed. My whole childhood I felt like an outsider because of her. I am from a middle-class suburb with more nuclear families than not, so everyone treated me like an alien. They would look at me like I was heartless if I said I do not celebrate Mother's Day or if I could not remember her birthday. I could sense the caution people used around me, like I was covered in cracks and would shatter instantly if someone even looked at me funny. That affected the way I treated myself for a while. In reality, though, I was mostly fine. I was insecure and struggled with some abandonment sensitivity, but aside from that, I was pretty happy. My grandparents are amazing people, and they always did the best they could to encourage and support me when I was young. I never felt unloved or unwanted, just frustrated that I had no chance at a normal life. I never realized how little those things matter once you get past high school, how unimportant normalcy is. I realize now that I am better off having gone through all that at a young age. I have a good head on my shoulders because, starting from a young age, I had to be mature enough for both my mother and myself. I struggle with anxiety, but it is mostly internal. As soon as I got to college, I rejected my past and became extremely independent, and I have come to realize that doing things on my own is where I thrive. I know I will never be like her, and I know my success will only spite her more, and that motivates me. I love who I am now, and I know I would not be this way if she had not fumbled so hard. Sorry this turned into more of a rant than an answer. With my mother in rehab right now, leaving my little brother to fend for himself like she did to me, I guess I was waiting for an opportunity like this to talk some shit. Thank you all for the love, support, and shared experiences. I have honestly never received this level of compassion from so many people at once and was shocked to see how many people weighed in and responded. I am so eternally grateful for all your kind words and encouragement. My intention was to just get some things off my chest, and although it is really sad to see how many people relate to what I have gone through, it also feels so good to finally know I am not alone after having spent so much time feeling isolated and alienated by my experiences. You are all brave, not only for going through what you have, but also for having the courage to share it. I am truly thankful for all of you. Please do not hesitate to message me if any of you would like to talk. I know how hard it is learning to care for yourself the way you should have been cared for. Having someone to talk to can make all the difference. If you feel like sharing privately or would like any of the resources that have helped me, my private messages are wide open. Lastly, if you were neglected or dealt with addiction in your family, please check out Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families and see if there is a group you can go to. It is an amazing group therapy program. It is just like Alcoholics Anonymous, and it is free. It has helped me so much. Even just read the Adult Children of Alcoholics and Dysfunctional Families laundry list if you have the time. It is a short list of traits pertaining to children of addicts, but it is very eye-opening. Story 8. I went to school with a girl who had her first child at 14. She had 2 more children before she graduated. At the age of 28, she became a grandmother. The child's great-great-great-grandmother was alive and only 82. Story 9. My mom and I are really close. She had me when she was 14. Growing up, I noticed many of my friends did not get along with their mothers, so I always thought my mom was very relatable. We eat, shop, get coffee, gossip, and just hang out. She worked a lot, sometimes multiple jobs at once, so I did fewer extracurricular activities than my friends, but I was pretty happy growing up. She is always concerned about money. I am starting to notice that she is not very good at saving or planning for retirement. I once asked a family friend how my parents were still living paycheck to paycheck now that we kids are grown. The friend explained that, in her opinion, my mom never learned how to take care of herself as an adult. Instead of learning how to manage adult responsibilities, she focused on taking care of her children. I will forever be grateful for my mom and the hard work and sacrifices she made to raise me and my siblings. Story 10. My mom was 18 when she had me. My aunt and uncle were only about 10 years older than I am. My uncle was only 6 years older. I got to do all kinds of fun things with them like skateboarding, surfing, and snowboarding. They were and still are more like siblings to me. My biological father was not involved. My mom fell in love at 20 with a 40-year-old. They are still together 38 years later, and he raised me as his own. He had 5 other children, so I had many brothers and sisters, and, to be honest, I had a better life than I would have if my biological father had stayed. Story 11. My mother resented me and the freedom I had as a teen and young adult. I experienced many things she did not, by choice. On her side of the family, I come from a long line of teen mothers, but I did not make that mistake. I was 27 when my daughter was born. My daughter is almost 22 and has no children yet, so the cycle is broken on our branch, at least. Story 12. Parents are still growing up and learning life lessons 10 years later because they never really had the chance while raising you. It's kind of cool, though, because if you are aware enough, you pick up on it too. Story 13. I was born in the early 2000s. My mom really liked emo music when I was little, so I considered myself emo at 6. I remember sitting in the back seat of my mom's 4Runner and listening to mindless self-indulgence, My Chemical Romance, Blink-182, American Football, Fall Out Boy, Taking Back Sunday, and all the late 1990s and early 2000s emo music. I got to watch a lot of 1990s cartoons and 2000s shows because that was what my mom watched. We always had fun sitting on the couch watching television. I had a really good childhood. My mom and I were always friends. She is a great mom, and I always look up to her for being a badass young single mother who raised me alone. Story 14. Update. I posted and went to bed, not expecting anyone to really see what I wrote. I certainly did not expect to wake up to all this. Thank you to everyone for the kind words and support. There were many questions asked and I will address them here. Trigger warning for abuse issues. Am I a child of rape? It is possible. Relatives on both sides said my parents treated one another very poorly. Drugs and alcohol were involved. I am an adult with 2 children ages 18 and 19. They are amazing, empathetic young people and I am very proud. I have very limited contact with my mother. It is superficial at best. After a childhood in which I was not allowed to show emotions, I have no desire to tell her anything important. Being forced to hide my feelings remains my biggest issue. I still struggle to believe anyone cares about my feelings, and I rarely show emotion or pain. I try to move beyond that every day. I know I missed out on a normal childhood. I became a teacher and enjoyed it. I loved educating and tried to be a mentor and role model to my students ages 12 to 14. My mother resented me. She still resents me, though it has lessened over the years. It was apparently my fault she missed her teenage years. So she dropped me off at a relative's house in another state when I was a toddler and hitchhiked around the country for a year. As I grew up, I was screamed at and beaten for looking like my biological father. She did not trust me at all because of it. I had to get permission to step outside to get the mail. I could not bathe myself until I was a teenager, and I could not do homework with others. It has never occurred to her that I am not guilty of anything. In her eyes, being my father's daughter is enough. Thanks again. Story 15. My mother was not a teenager when she had me, but she started having children when she was 14 and was basically pregnant every other year. I was her 6th child, born when she was 25, and she had 11 children in total. She does not remember or know exactly who my biological father is. Story 16. My partner and I, a gay couple, raised his niece's son from 6 months to 18 years. She was immature when she had him at 16 and decided to feed him less so he would not use so many diapers. He calls us Dad and Papa and calls his mother Kathy. He is now 26. We love him dearly. Story 17. My teenage mother had less money, less patience, dated more men, and was divorced several times. My partner's teenage mother had more money, more patience, dated only 2 men, and was divorced only once. I think it is more the person than the age that makes a difference. The reason my mother-in-law had more money was that she had a good personality, was able to get good jobs, advance her career, spend responsibly, work very hard to earn a college degree, and this was over 40 years ago when the cost of living and wages were more comparable. The reason my mother did not have more money was that she is hard to get along with and struggled to get a good job. When she did get a good job, she was not financially responsible, and the divorces caused her to lose most or all of her gains because she chose to walk away rather than split assets. My mother also earned a college degree and still struggles with jobs because she argues so much. Lastly, none of them were strippers or escorts. They are close in age. Both had little or no parental support. My mother-in-law moved to the United States from the Philippines, and my mother was kicked out. Thank you and good night. Story 18. I met every one of my grandparents and some of my great-grandparents too. Story 19. I grew up alongside my mother and all of my aunts and uncles. For example, I was home alone making stovetop spaghettios when I was 5 years old. As a result, I had to become more mature, independent, and more accepting when things did not go my way than many people I know. I do not really get along with people my age because of that. Story 20. My mom is 15 years older than me and has had sexual relationships with 7 of my friends throughout my life, 4 of them while I was still in high school. I became more mature than her when I was 12. I took care of my 3 siblings, cooking, cleaning, and getting them to school. I started working 40 hours per week at 14 so my siblings could have some sort of a normal childhood, clothes, school supplies. I even took them go-karting on each of their birthdays. Those are some of my favorite memories. Overall, my childhood was terrible. I never got to be a kid. I don't think anyone should have children before they are mature enough to handle them, and I think teen mothers should have increased oversight by Child Protective Services. For context, this was in a small town in the 1980s. My siblings and I are doing pretty well nowadays. Story 21. I know my great-grandmother. I do not know my parents. Lesson: do not have children as a teenager. Story 22. I was a teen mom. I asked my 16-year-old what differences he saw between himself and his friends, and he said not much difference, other than we are more likely to like the same music. Story 23. My parents were teenagers. They had no money. They hated each other and hated me as a result. They had no idea how to raise a child. Now I feel deeply damaged and ashamed of my own existence. Shame controls my life, and most of what I do is driven by guilt. I feel guilty for existing, and it is killing me. Story 24. Both of my parents were 18 when they had me. I got lucky. They loved each other and are still together today, almost 32 years later. I had a great home life with supportive parents. However, I had to put up with a relentless onslaught of sexualized jokes about my mother starting at around 13. A teacher even said, in front of the class after a parent-teacher conference night in middle school, "Damn, Ty the fire guy. Your mom is smoking hot. Is she single?" Story 25. Sometimes I think my mother's life would have been better if I had not been born, or at least if I had been born when she was an adult. I'm sorry you feel this way. If these thoughts are about you, please consider reaching out to someone you trust or a mental health professional. If you are in immediate danger or have a plan to harm yourself, contact emergency services right now. For example, call 911 in the United States. If you are in the United States, you can call or text 988 for the Suicide and Crisis Lifeline. If you are elsewhere, please contact your local emergency number or a local crisis line. Are you safe right now? Story 26. They are not my biological parents, but might as well have been since they raised me. My biological parents were alcoholic. My mother is still alive and remarried to my stepfather. My father died by suicide when I was 15. My biological parents did not care about me. My best friend's parents did everything for me. They had their oldest daughter when the mother was 16 and the father was 19. They had my best friend when the mother was 18 and the father was 21, and a youngest son when they were 23 and 27. My friend's mother was a high school dropout but graduated from a private program when we were 12. They worked hard, bought a house at 22, and provided not just for their biological children but for me as well. I was included in everything and even had my own bed. They disciplined me with groundings when necessary and were fair and kind. They showed me that I could rise above my circumstances. When I became pregnant at 17 and had my son at 18, they did not discourage me. I was incredibly scared. I did not intend to become pregnant and did not know the first thing about babies, but they helped me get through it. I think of them when I raise my children, not my biological parents. I am proud to be their child and thankful they loved me enough to take me in. I am not who I am without them. Story 27. My mom had 7 children with 3 different men and she is not yet 45. She has never had a relationship with a partner that did not result in pregnancy. Despite being the second oldest, I do not have a mother-daughter relationship with her. She began having children at 16. Teenagers are not known for making great decisions. Story 28. My birth parents were 14 and 15 when I was born. They opted for a closed adoption, but my birth mother left a thoughtful gift for me. My mother told me that my birth mother was very kind and, throughout the pregnancy, was always really worried about me. She made many watercolor paintings with poems for me during her pregnancy and gave them to my mother. My mother had them bound in a book and read them to me when I was little. Some describe how she could feel me moving and what my heartbeat sounded like. They look like a child made them, and I cannot believe how much she went through at such a young age. I think this made me more compassionate toward girls than other boys in middle and high school. Story 29. My parents were 15 when I was born. They married at 16 and stayed together until my mother passed from cancer at 58. They had one of the all-time great love stories. They both left high school, my mother to raise me and my father to work. I never had to see how hard they worked to provide for my little sister and me, but I gained an unbelievable work ethic from them. My teenage rebellion included a lot of marijuana use, though I always kept my job and did not graduate from high school. My mother signed me up to get my General Educational Development Certificate, never giving up. My father was able to retire to take care of my mother when she became ill. My parents are highly respected in our community, and people still talk about how much they loved my mother. I will be able to retire in 6 years thanks to the work ethic they instilled in me. Don't let anything keep you down. According to statistics, my father should have left my mother, and my sister and I should have been taken away instead of us having a great life. Story 30. My mother was 15 when she became pregnant with me, and my biological father left when he found out. I am 25 years old now. I had a terrible childhood. My mother married an abusive man when I was 9 months old. I have always known him as my father. They had my brother, who is autistic, a year later. I remember taking my brother away to play when my parents became physical with each other. He would choke my mother, push her through walls, curse at her. As I grew older, I tried defending her, and eventually the abuse turned toward me. They would deflect fights by blaming something I had supposedly done wrong. I was pushed through drywall and had my head slammed into a door while my father yelled in my face. I never felt I could talk to my mother and resented her for allowing the mistreatment. When I was a teenager, I overheard her say she wished she had aborted me. I grew up in a very messy household. Roaches would fall into my food or onto my face while I slept. I had lice from about age 4 to 13. I was sexually abused by a friend of my parents from about 5 to 8. He had a son who he forced us to do things to one another every time we went over to his house. When I was 6, I was beaten because I was playing with Barbies and pretending they were having sex. I did not know any better. Once I started going to sleepovers, I realized none of this was normal and I wanted to be away from home. I left at 17 and never looked back. Now, as an adult, I do not know how much of this was related to my mother being young when she had me. Maybe it would have been the same if she had me 5 to 10 years later. What I do know is I have many things to unlearn and many things I still need to learn about healthy relationships and a healthy household. I struggle with depression, abandonment issues, codependency, and anxiety. I have a son who I love with all my heart. He is the only person who keeps me going. I take my childhood and my relationships with my parents as a guide for what not to do. My parents divorced earlier this year. I talk to my mother occasionally and sometimes to my father. We never really talk about what happened to me growing up, and family functions are awkward. Sometimes I think I can see in my mother's eyes that she is sorry, but she has never said anything. Seeing how my friends' families interacted when I was young is what I try to emulate. Little things like how they ate dinner together I try to mimic. My life was very different from my friends in ways I could not explain then. One day I will find my normal. Story 31. I became a mother in my late teens, and more often than not people assumed my children were my siblings. Now that I am older and have a couple of children, that happens less often. It is scary to think I could be a grandparent at 40, though. As my children grow, I will take their feelings about having a young mother into account. Story 32. The age difference between my brother and me is 22 years, and the difference between my sister and me is 23 years. I also know people my age who have children the same age as my siblings, so it feels a bit strange. Story 33. One of my roommates was born to a teenage mother, and I was born to an older mother. She was almost 40. For the most part it is pretty normal, but every once in a while something will come up, such as the eruption of Mount St. Helens. My roommate will say that her mother remembers it happening when she was a child, and I will say that my mother was in college. Story 34. Warning. Mentions of drug use, attempted murder, and mental illness. My mom was 17 when she had me. My parents were far too young. They married and 11 years later they divorced. It ruined my childhood. They did not want to be parents. I have two brothers. I spent my 20s addicted to heroin. My middle brother served time in his 20s for hitting a man in the head with a baseball bat. My youngest brother developed schizophrenia in his 20s after suppressing memories of being abused by our neighbor because our mom was too busy to care. None of us were ready for adulthood, and I resent them for it to this day. Update. I have not used heroin in over 5 years. My middle brother got out and has done well since. He makes good money and just bought a house. The youngest is okay when he takes his medication, but if he does not, he believes the Federal Bureau of Investigation is trying to kill him. I have two children and I am married to their mother. They live a life I could have only dreamed of. I will never understand how someone can look at their children and feel anything negative. Story 35. I have a lot of younger siblings from my father, and the difference between how they are growing up and how I grew up is so different despite having the same parent. I had to grow up a lot earlier. My mother was in school and working full-time, and my father had much younger children to care for. I always say my mother raised me to be 40. My siblings are children and teenagers, whereas I mostly had to take care of myself. I appreciate that I had young parents because I think it made me a pretty well-rounded adult, even though having so much responsibility as a child was tough. Story 36. I know a teenage parent whose child later became a teenage parent. He has a living grandparent and a living grandchild. Story 37. My mom is often mistaken for my sister. People are surprised she has a 20-year-old. We have completely different tastes in music. Story 38. I am not a kid anymore. My parents were 17 and 18 when I was born. I am now in my 40s, and my parents are just over 60 and still healthy. They have been active my whole life and were young while I was a child. Growing up was sometimes low budget, but my parents were engaged and able to keep up. Story 39. I'm going to share my life story, so buckle down. My mother was 15 when I was born. She worked to give me the life she could not have because of her mother. I spent my early life moving from family house to family house until she and my father were able to afford an apartment. She loves my younger brother and me unconditionally, and she has said that if she had not had us at such a young age, she might never have had children. We went from shopping at swap meets to affording brand names. That said, my mother is not a saint. She was on dialysis when she was 21 and was on the waiting list for a kidney when a compatible donor became available. She seriously considered not having the surgery because she did not want to live with all the medication and pain. She said, "If it were not for you two, I probably would have stayed on dialysis until my body gave out. I just could not imagine leaving your father alone to care for you both. The donor literally saved our lives. This is a good time to bring up my father. He is an immigrant from Mexico who came to the United States with the clothes on his back and without a formal education. He grew up on a ranch and, at 20, made it to the United States. Without a proper education or legal status, he has supported my mother, my brother, and me by washing cars. Every day from 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. He washed cars to provide for us and give us nice things. My mother could not work because she had two children to care for and was legally disabled because of dialysis. My mother does not let me make the same mistakes she made. She pushes me to do better. She did not let me eat ice cream for breakfast, and she did not let me play Grand Theft Auto on my Nintendo DS, but she did not do those things because she was not cool. She did them because she cared. Sorry for dumping all this. It is nice to get everything out. In short, my mother was the first to break the cycle of abuse in our family. Instead of raising me the way her mother raised her, she raised me with love and understanding. Not letting me stab my hand with a pencil like other kids was not because she was not cool. It was because she cared, unlike other kids' parents. Story 40. I wasn't going to post in this thread because I didn't think my mother having me at 19 would be that interesting, but fuck it. I'm writing bullet points. My mother, 19, and my father, 24, decided to have an abortion 3 months before I was conceived. I was the fuck it child. They married shortly thereafter, then split not long after. Most of my time as a young kid was spent living at my grandparents' house, often with my mother and my two aunts, all in the same middle-class home that was my grandfather's pride and joy. I recently learned he was very likely a Ku Klux Klan Grand Wizard. I hated my grandfather because he was a huge asshole, but I had a great childhood thanks to him. Almost everything we ate was grown in our large garden, on fruit trees in the yard, or from berry bushes and grapevines. I helped a lot and learned many things. I barely mentioned my mother there. My mother had lousy retail jobs, left most parenting to my grandparents, and had a cavalcade of men she was seeing that I would occasionally expose as pieces of shit. I'm leaving my father out of this story because he did his best but spent his whole life struggling. He was 100 times the parent she was, and he was an alcoholic. My mother got pregnant when I was 9. Her sisters got pregnant soon after. My grandfather was in an awful accident with a Cox Communications van, and years later it led to his death. That's when things went off the rails. My grandmother had a stroke soon after and needed a lot of help. Meanwhile, the house kept deteriorating, and my mother started coming home with animals. We received a $2 million settlement for my grandfather's death when I was a junior in high school. During high school, I often played father to my little brother because, of course, his dad is a piece of shit, in addition to my school life being pure hell because I was an unpopular nerd. I got bullied at school every day. Then I would come home and have to clean, take care of animals, and look after my brother, all while my mother yelled at me and I tried to help my grandmother, who was recovering from her stroke and couldn't do much. My grandmother got the bulk of the money, but each of the 3 sisters got fat checks too. Grandma fixed up the house and yard and paid it off. The sisters moved out and did their own shitty things. My mother, cocaine, a 1968 Camaro Super Sport, and a bunch of useless stuff, none of which I ever asked for. She refused to get me badly needed braces. Before she knew it, she was flat broke again. The house quickly became a hoarding situation, both animals and junk. My mother is absurdly lazy, so nothing got done unless I did it, and I don't even remember if she was working. I just remember non-stop yelling at everything and everyone. To cut the rest short, I bailed at 18 because she put all the responsibility on me, likely as a way to control and keep me under her thumb. If not for my father, it might have worked longer, but I had somewhere to go. 20 years later, I've been divorced twice, rarely had any sense of stability, and lost most people I've ever cared about either through death, most untimely, some very untimely, or through them falling apart. My mother had 2 more kids, who are now 17 and 18, and this family has always hung around my neck like a giant weighted stone. Even though I've spent the years moving further and further away, they're all varying pieces of shit. The brother I played father to in high school got engaged and had me convinced he was turning his life around. He asked me to co-sign a $3,000 loan so they could move to her hometown. I agreed, said they should visit for a bit before they moved, and they wound up mooching off me for 6 months, blew all the money on drugs, then stiffed me. But at 39, I've crawled my way up to a comfortable desk job making nearly $40,000, and I met the absolute love of my life this year. She has 2 adorable boys that I look forward to treating as my own and being the person for them that I never had. We're very likely moving in together into her newly purchased home at the end of this year once my lease is up. After all the shit my mother has inflicted on me my entire life, I never stopped pushing. I feel like my life is really beginning, and despite near unending depression and anxiety, I'm hopeful for once. The kicker? The woman I'm madly in love with, who I'm more attracted to than any other woman I've ever met, has the same name as my mother. Story 41. My mother was 19 when I was born. My early childhood involved being left with anyone, anywhere, or completely alone. I remember being 3 or 4 years old, running around in the woods alone and going into other people's houses to hang out. This changed when my mother married and my stepfather, who later adopted me, joined the household. He was extremely strict. My mother began beating me at 9 and continued until I became bigger than her a few years later. One of my proudest childhood memories is sitting on her to keep her from attacking my younger brothers. My father beat me until I married at 19. I was locked out, called a whore, and denied opportunities because my mother said she never got to. They refused to help me fill out my student loan applications or give me the information to do so. I resent my parents and have raised my children completely differently. Story 42. It was bad. They were horrible, trash humans who messed me up pretty badly. I was shuffled from house to house and did not find a stable home until I was a teenager, when I lived with my grandparents. I have trust and abandonment issues. In other areas of my life, I am successful. I did very well in school because it was my safe place. I became a teacher. I am married and have 2 children, both of whom I had while married and after I finished college. Story 43. Mom was 17 when she had me. I am 43 this year. My life now is epic. I saw how things were growing up and did not want that life at all. Money was tight. We had no holidays and sometimes no money for food. Mom and Dad split up, which was horrific. I got a good education, married a nice woman, and had my first child at 39. I am financially secure and pretty happy. Story 44. My mother was 17 when I was born, 22 when I started kindergarten, 28 when I started middle school, 32 when I graduated high school, and 35 when I had my first child. My son is 35 and has just become a father. I would say he has broken the cycle. Story 45. My parents constantly worked to make a living. I never received gifts like a car for my birthday. They were hardworking and always tried to improve our financial situation. It shocked me to learn they were being hit hard by financial and adulting pressures while I was in elementary school. They were very loving and taught me to work hard and not be materialistic. Story 46. My mother had me at 17. She worked as a stripper on and off until her mid-30s. She was physically and mentally abusive and moved me to a new school every year of my life, including high school. Luckily, I broke the cycle and will graduate from college this spring. I am estranged from her and would never hurt a fly. Story 47. How much of a teenager are we talking about? My mother was 18 when I was born. In her view, we grew up together. My birth forced her to grow up, which had its ups and downs. I am sure she resents missing out on her softball scholarships because she became pregnant, but now she has 4 children. Story 48. My mom was 17 when she had me. She had to deal with a deadbeat, abusive, drug-addicted boyfriend, my biological father, and his family, who kept threatening to take custody of me, all while having very little support from her own family. Somehow she escaped, made it through, and is still a generally well-balanced person. She met someone new when I was 3 and worked 2 jobs to help him get a high-paying trade job. Now she's a stay-at-home mom and we live on the nicer side of town. My mom isn't perfect by a long shot, but she did what she had to do to make sure I never went without, and I never noticed when things got tough. I only realized it was unusual when kids and teachers at my Catholic private school gave me weird looks after they did the math on my mom's age. Other than those judgmental looks, life wasn't really much different, in my opinion. Sure, it helped that my paternal grandmother babysat and paid for my private school, but I have to hand it to my mom. She had abusive, neglectful parents, but she made a concerted effort to break that cycle at 17. I don't completely agree with the way she chooses to live her life now, but I find a lot of inspiration in how she escaped a very toxic situation and is standing taller than the people who tried to drag her down. Story 49. My great-great-grandmother passed away at age 103 when I was 24. Three of my four grandparents are still alive and in their mid-60s. I was the ring bearer at my own parents' wedding at age 2. It never felt weird until I realized in school that my grandparents were younger than many of my friends' parents. My mom was carded at my 21st birthday party. She said that I was her child and that I had just ordered a beer. I have lived a normal life and my parents are still together, which I think is pretty incredible. Story 50. I had to grow up quickly because I watched my parents make mistakes early in their lives. Story 51. My mother was only 15 and was not a good parent to me, too young and inexperienced to know what to do. With my sister, however, she is amazing. There is an age difference of 14 years. It is interesting to see how she has grown into a loving and caring mother. Story 52. My mother was 16 when she had me and put me up for adoption. She forced her way into my life when I was a teenager, then promptly disappeared for 10 years to raise her other child. We made contact again in my 20s, which went terribly, so I went no contact a few years later. I did not even receive a birthday message from her on Facebook, yet I see her posts about how much she loves her daughter all the time. I am not a fan of teen motherhood. Story 53. My mother often said she regretted having children, and I was neglected and abused in many ways in our home. Her severe inexperience led to misinformation and a lack of guidance on how to handle many situations. So I did not receive the care I needed. I have been estranged from my entire family for 2.5 years, and I do not regret it. I am 30 years old. Thanks a bunch for sticking around till the end of the video. Remember to subscribe, and until next time, stay awesome and goodbye.